So, before we get started, because I know you've all been sitting for a while, everyone stand up. I heard groans. People don't want to.
An interactive presentation.
This is the 90 seconds of interactivity. But I just want you guys to get loose and relaxed. So do this with your shoulders. Roll your shoulders a bit. Maybe go the other way. Go on your tippy toes and back down. It's good for you. You should do it on planes too, so you don't get deep vein thrombosis. Turn to your left. Look at the person to your left and say blah, 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 blah. All right, turn to the person to your right and say Grzegorz, 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 Grzegorz. Okay, you can sit down now. Thank you. Actually, I should have had you guys blow on the person's neck or something because it's hot in here too. So hopefully that warms you up, but also calms you down a bit. I'm going to be talking for the next 20 minutes or so, and then I actually want to have a lot of time for question and answer because I'm going to cover a lot of stuff, but also because I'm happy to talk about anything in here or anything not in here as well. This is a topic that I've been thinking about for quite a while. Especially over the course of the last year, where I've worked with a number of startups, both in a mentorship capacity, etc. And it's the things that I'm surprised people miss. And it's only when I think about it and put myself in the shoes of a founder that I realize, oh, of course, it's not obvious. So some of the things I'm going to say may sound obvious, but still pay attention because in the moment you might forget them. And then some of them are actually very specific and maybe a little bit surprising. But it's, again, the reason I'm talking about this is because people really mess it up. So just a show of hands, I'm curious, how many of you, well, first of all, how many of you are in a startup? Okay, not all. So there's some startup aspirants, looks like about half. And how many of you have either pitched a large company or are in the process of doing so, or would know that it's in the horizon for you? The same people. Okay, so that sounds about right. Because as you're scaling up, you're going to find, most likely, that you do need to work with large companies, either because they're your clients, they may be your platform, or in many cases, you may need to partner with them. Oh, I have to snap, don't I? Yeah. Yeah. So to begin with, oh, and by the way, I'm doing what Tomasz would probably hate, which is using my own paper. This should have been memorized, but I've got a lot to say, so I'm just going to read off some of it. So a little bit about me and my background and why I'm the one talking about this. As Chris had mentioned, I did what was called new business development at Google before it was Alphabet. And what that meant was that we worked with all of the early stage product teams. This was Google X, in fact, before it was called Google X. This was Google Research, which is now a lot of the machine learning that we work on and natural language processing. These were other projects like the Cultural Institute and the Art Project. How many of you have heard of the Cultural Institute? Just curious. Oh, okay, a few. Good, good. I love it. Also, Google Helpouts. Where's Anya from the third pitch? Yeah. Have you heard about Google Helpouts? Who else has heard about Google Helpouts? So Anya, that's a problem. Because this is exactly what you're doing, and it's a huge opportunity and an incredibly, incredibly difficult problem. I worked on that for 18 months of my life, and it was a nightmare. So I can share some notes with you afterwards. And what was that? No pressure. No pressure. It's an opportunity. So anyway, so in this capacity, I was doing business strategy, and also partnerships was a big part of it. So I got a lot of pitches from all kinds of companies, but probably more so than any from startups that either were well-meaning or actually had the right tech, but in some cases just really blew it. On the other hand, some of them did a really great job, and those became partners of ours, and in many cases ended up being very profitable or very advantageous for the companies. The second piece is that I now, as Chris mentioned, lead operations for Google for Entrepreneurs, and so now, like I said, I do a lot of mentoring with entrepreneurs, and this comes up all the time. I find a lot of mystery and misconceptions kind of lay behind how to pitch large companies. Before I go on, how many of you know about Campus? Campus Warsaw, Campus London? Oh, wow. That's more than any of the other hand-raised questions. So that's good. Anyway, very quickly, these are our spaces for entrepreneurs. We have them in six cities: London, Madrid, Tel Aviv, Warsaw, Seoul, and Sao Paulo. And Campus Berlin is coming up. That's a big part of my job, is running the operations of these campuses and starting new ones. Okay. Now, why you should not necessarily listen to me, or why you should take everything I say with a grain of salt. I think this is important because often people come on stage and tell you these lessons that seem to be fixed in stone, and I want you all to remember that they aren't. I'm going to move around a lot for Martin. Oh, he's got it. Cool. So this is important. So I know what it's like to do BD in tech companies. I know a little bit about healthcare. Oh, I didn't mention I worked on Google Life Sciences, now called Verily. If you want to talk about a crazy project afterwards, Project Baseline, I can tell you a bit about. So I know these industries and I know how they work, but I also want to acknowledge that other industries probably work differently. So I don't know, for example, if this works in fashion. So take that with a grain of salt. Also, different cultures are different. I've lived in a number of different places. I live in Poland now, kind of. The US, the UK, India, Hong Kong. And these are all true with all those experiences, but I have to acknowledge that through all of that, there's always been an American on the other side of on one of the sides of the table, if not both. That's been me. So if you're a Polish company pitching to a French company, it might be very different. And I think that's important to acknowledge. And then the third is that I'm not you. So everyone's got a different style, and what works for me might not work for you, and I want you to be true to that as well. It's hard to do it with I'm just going to say next slide, please. Thank you, Chris. This is the most, maybe the only important slide in the entire slide deck. By the way, I suck at slides. So I did BD and operations. You didn't hear marketing. You didn't hear design. I don't like slide decks. I'm bad at them. This swoosh was my final flourishing touch. I'm very proud of it.
Looks great.
Thank you. It looks great. So this is the most important thing to remember about the other person that you're talking to. I'm that person. We're doing a hypothetical here. I have a life, and you can make my life easier. So think about that. Almost everything else I'm going to say in the next 15 minutes is just this said in different ways. So this can also be phrased a little bit differently, and this is originally what I had, which is, next slide, please. Corporations are people too, but that's really creepy and very US Supreme Court-y, and I didn't like it. But next slide back. It's the same idea, right? Remember that I'm not Google and that I'm a person, that I am the person you're emailing or calling or hounding down at conferences, that I have things that I care about at home, that I have a limited amount of time, that I'm stressed out sometimes, that I probably have a boss, almost definitely have a boss, actually definitely have a boss, unless you're pitching the CEO, which is a mistake and is not on this list, but you should not pitch the CEO of Google. These are things you should consider, right? Because these are the things that are going to inform the way that you pitch me. And the second part is probably the most vital, that you can help me, right? The reason you're talking to me in the first place is because you have something that I should want, whether I know it or not. Help me get that inside my company, if it's a partnership or if it's a sale, whatever it might be. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next few slides are a couple of do's and don'ts to make it easy. I'll share them all at the end as well, so you can copy them down there if you want. So the first one is kind of intuitive. Put yourself in my shoes. Google me, research me, figure out who I am. Think about who my internal stakeholders are, right? I'm not Google, but I do work with other teams, and if I'm a BD person, I'm probably working with the product team, I'm probably working with policy, I'm probably working with the marketing team. All of those people are the ones that I need to pitch to, and you should think about that. Also think about what my day looks like. So a BD person is, one of those business people. They like meetings, that's why they're in that job. They like talking, they talk too much. So they probably have a lot of meetings or a lot of phone calls, and they have a ton of emails, because everyone has a lot of emails, especially BD people. So keep that in mind. And then also personalize your communication, right? I know some of this is going to be about form letters and form emails that you're going to send to a bunch of people. Make me feel special. And that's key to it. I can tell a form letter right away. Next slide, please. Concise. I know that what you're doing is the most important thing in the world to you, and it cannot be explained in 10 sentences. You have to do it in 2. That's it. I'm not going to read that much further. I need to understand what you're doing at the very beginning, which is next slide, please. And I need you to give me that value proposition immediately. If it's not in the first paragraph, it's over. So tell me why what you're proposing to me matters to me. Again, I'm your target, not Google, but also why it matters to Google, because now I need to go sell this internally to others. So I'm happy actually to share some examples, but I'd love to hear if there are examples from you guys of pitches that work and pitches that don't. And for both of these, it's important to note that don't be afraid of not giving me everything. Give me enough to pique my interest, and if I want to know more, I'll ask you for more, and that's a good sign. So you don't need to give me everything all at once. Next slide, please. Make the ask of me super easy and clear. So I'll give you a quick example. A company that's based in Campus São Paulo, in our Brazil campus, had a big issue with one of the API pricings that we had. And they originally forwarded me this email thread that was all of the company talking to each other, and at the bottom it was the pricing from the email that they got forwarded from Google, some auto response. And I got this email, this long chain, and I was there to help them, and I just responded saying, I don't know what you're asking me for, tell me in one sentence. He responded back with a really great sentence, which was essentially, we're a nonprofit working for a social good mission, and we are in a developing country. I'm making this much longer than he made it. This pricing doesn't work for us. Now that's something that I can easily send to the product team and the product manager and say, hey guys, take a look at this email and you can read through all the thread afterwards, but the most important thing is to give me what I need to do to pass it on, whether that's product or policy or some other internal stakeholders. Next slide, please. But don't do this. So don't ask me for a bunch of intros. And this is another email that I've gotten before. Someone says I'm the head, actually this is not even a startup, this is a person who was actually a warm introduction to me who led the research arm of an important company, and he said, I want to talk with someone from Chauffeur, the self-driving car, Verily, Google Life Sciences, Loon, and Google Search. And I can't do that. I'm not going to waste, thinking about my social capital internally, I'm not going to go email 4 different people in 4 different parts of the company unless you give me, again, the value proposition and preferably narrow down what your ask is of me before you send it out. Next slide, please. Cold emails are okay. Now, some people that work in my field think it's crazy that I actually read emails and by cold email, I mean you email me out of the blue, you get my email from somewhere. By the way, it's just my name at google.com. So if you do want to chat, I'm happy to. I read all of them. I don't necessarily respond to all of them just because of volume. But I think as a BD person, it's actually really, I won't say it's the right thing to do, but I think it's actually advantageous because there are opportunities out there. And the best way for me to find out is to read about them. Some people don't do that. So on this one, recognize that some people don't agree with this. They won't check their LinkedIn messages. But of course, and this is true for almost anything, including if you're raising money with VCs, warm intros are better. So if you can put in a bit of work and go through LinkedIn or post on Facebook and see if your friends have any intros at a certain place, I recommend doing that as well. Next slide, please. I don't have time for this, ever. It should not be in your intro email that you'd like to schedule an exploratory call with me. I need you to tell me exactly what you want and why I want it, but not that we're going to schedule a phone call or a hangout with someone I've never met before. Now, there's the big asterisk on this is if it is a warm intro and if there's something more there and if we're talking about something else, there are times when I'll take an exploratory call, but most often not. So again, think about me, think about my life, I'm a human being, and think about how you can make my life easy. Next slide, please. I am usually scanning through my lower priority emails when I'm on a train or in front of a urinal, and I'm not going to download an attachment on my phone. Now you can send me one and it can be supplemental, but the main information needs to be in the body of your email and probably at the very top. So again, consistent with the previous theme of be concise and give me your value proposition immediately. Next slide, please. Yeah, speaking of attachments, don't send me your investor pitch deck. This happens all the time because I get it, it's easy for you. It's easy because it's the thing you've put blood, sweat, and tears into, and I want to respect that because that's really important. But that doesn't mean you can use it for everything. Your investor pitch deck will actually do you harm because as the BD person on the other side, you probably don't want me to know your financials or what your projections are. You probably don't want me to know what your next round is, even though those are things I might find pretty interesting. But again, tailor these and do some of the work for me so that you can make my life as easy as possible. Next slide, please. Don't email all of us. So sometimes you won't be surprised to learn that the business development people tend to sit near each other, or they have an email list where they all talk to each other. We collect bad pitches, and you don't want to be in that pile of the things that we think are funny. But that doesn't mean you can't email two of us, for example, but just let us know. Say, I also emailed Mateusz. And that can be risky because you can kind of have a, what is it? Not tragedy of the commons. What's the other one? The effect where, who knows this? Maybe this is really American, where no one calls the police because everyone's watching the murder. No? No one knows what it is? Okay, I'll look it up. Or someone Google it and let me know. It's some Italian woman who died in New York at some point. Anyway. Just let us know that you've emailed the other people. But I'd still prefer that you just do one person at a time. Next, please. Don't ask me to acquire your company. That's someone else. So that's not my job, typically. And again, the confusion here I totally get because these terms are used throughout different companies and they mean different things at different companies. At Google, business development can mean my job as product partnerships, or it can mean salespeople. It can mean all kinds of things. We call the mergers and acquisitions people corporate development. Now, at some companies, corporate development means business development. So I get it, it's confusing. But if you're pitching someone for a partnership, that person, if they're at a big company, is not the person that's going to acquire you. And also a secret, the people who want to acquire you, who are looking at acquiring you, don't really like people who are too eager to sell. So it's not a good strategy almost ever. How am I doing on time? Oh, but that was like you're short on time gesture. Oh, one more thing on the don't ask me to buy you piece. Sometimes we do get here, actually, and I've had, well, I guess maybe only one. Mostly what happens with acquisitions is I send them to the corp dev people, and they go through all the due diligence and it never works out. At least one of the companies that we were partnering with, we ended up acquiring. So you still want to work with me, and you still want to develop a good relationship with me if you're going that route of partnership than acquisition.
Did you mean Kitty Genovese killing?
Yes.
Yeah, bystander effect.
Bystander effect. Thank you, Kitty Genovese. It's actually really sad. It's like a terrible thing to reference and then forget her name, which is actually kind of the bystander. No, it's not. It's similar though. It's like a parallel. Thank you. NDAs. Oh, next slide, please. Guys, look at that.
That's squish, wow.
Isn't that amazing? No, it was squished as well, but also I did two different colors. It was really hard. This took me more time than no, that's okay. Don't make a fuss about the NDA. So I should say that I have a legal background. But so I went to law school, but then I didn't become a lawyer, which means that I can give legal advice to anyone because I can't commit malpractice, which is great. Because if I actually were a lawyer, part of this would be illegal. But as someone who has no legal standing, I can tell you NDAs don't really mean that much. They don't have that much. They don't have teeth. The only way that you're successfully going to litigate an NDA is if you can demonstrate that there's harm and direct damages. And most companies aren't going to go through that, especially because you're a startup and you're probably judgment proof anyway because you don't have any money. So don't worry about it. If you really think you have something that's super confidential that no one can know, A, you're probably wrong, and you should be more open about this, and this is a whole other talk about how startups should share more. But B, if you're right, which you're probably not. If you're right, then just don't tell me that thing. Like the very secret thing you don't have to tell me. And then another kind of tangent is we actually don't want to know that thing either. So this is actually interesting to know, a surprise to me. If you send me an attachment with all of your intellectual property, I will delete that email and respond to you saying I did not read your attachment. Because if I've then read that, then you can sue me later on, and my patent attorneys will get really angry with me that I read the email. So don't send me the secret information. But do sign my NDA. And mostly it's not because I want to go sue you, it's because I have to send you an NDA in order to talk with you. That's not always the case, but often it is. And it's a form letter, no one cares. Don't lawyer up, don't redline my NDA, because as soon as you send me back a red line from some lawyer, I know two things. One is that you're hiring lawyers, which you don't have money for, and two, that you're going to be a pain, and I don't want to deal with you anymore, so I'm not going to respond anymore. There's one exception to that, which is if you're jurisdiction piece, like if you don't want to be held to California law, that's usually an easy change, but even then, I just say it doesn't matter. Yes, thank you. Don't email me on a Friday afternoon. So this is where it gets really specific. Oh, wait. It's funny, I haven't actually been looking at these. So I've probably not said some really good stuff. Oh, last page. So remember, again, the general theme is we're human beings. Friday afternoons, we might be really great at our inbox. Many of us are, that's why we got our jobs. But most of us aren't, and a Friday afternoon email with action items attached, not literally attached, but metaphorically, yeah, is going to get lost. So I'm not going to come back to that Monday morning, probably. Phone calls I actually feel a little bit differently about, because often Fridays I don't have, first of all, most people at Google don't have phone numbers. So that isn't relevant, but if there are other companies that do, I actually think Friday afternoons can be a good time for a phone call, but also understand that the action items won't get acted upon. The reason being, people don't schedule meetings on Friday afternoons. But again, general principle, I have a life, and you can make it easier. Next slide, please. Think of my calendar, so both in terms of, like I said before, how busy I am, right? If you look at BD people's calendars, meeting, and then you try to squeeze in, you're responding to emails in 25 minutes, and then you go back to meetings. One example here that actually worked for me when I was pitching, so when I worked for the Cultural Institute, I was pitching the White House to work with us, and they weren't responding to my phone calls, to my emails, partly because they don't do emails as much as we do. And so I found that I could actually, if I called them 5 minutes before the hour, then I would get them on the phone, because most meetings start on the hour. So if you call them 5 minutes before, they're probably on their way between meetings, and they might actually answer. That's just a little hack that kind of works. Time of year matters as well. So don't, for example, email Android people right before I/O. Entertainment people, don't talk to them before Christmas. Europeans, as you guys know, don't bother in August. Also true for VCs. No one works in August. Actually, for BD people, August is a great time because all their counterparts in Europe aren't working. So the Americans actually do work a lot in August, and they get a lot of things done, which sucks, and we shouldn't do that. That's a whole other talk, which I'll give later. You guys are better than we are in this sense. Next slide, please. Measure it. So that sounds dirty. Don't measure it, but measure this. Or measure it, whatever. I don't know. Do you want to know? Chris, do you want to know?
Does size matter?
That was in the first talk. Is it worth measuring it? Where's this going, by the way?
I don't know. Let's move on.
No, not the talk. I meant is it posted somewhere online?
Yes.
Okay. We'll get rid of that part. So this is more of, what was it?
Do you want it to be posted?
I don't know. Can we have a vote? Raise of hands. What's the question? Should you measure it?
I'm lost.
There's so many layers to the onion here. Anyway, it's really hot in here. So this is more of a sales thing. So this is more if you're emailing 50 different clients or potential partners and you want to see what works. And this is not the case of we can only partner with Google or Apple or Amazon. then you've only got one shot each time, so 3 shots. But if you're pitching a bunch of people, do some analytics. Like, figure out that you might find that, for example, the fashion industry really responds to emails sent on Tuesdays. So if you're looking at high volumes, I would recommend doing some analytics as well. And then I got 3 more. Next slide, please. Do stand out. We get a lot of these. That kind of goes without saying. But if you want to be a little bit quirky in there, again, assuming you're following all the other rules and being concise, etc., do it. Next slide, please. Following up. I actually thought this was another example where there was a disagreement of minds, but actually I surveyed some BD folks and almost everyone agreed that you should follow up, that it's good to email me when I haven't responded to your email after some time. So my general rule is I will never email someone within 5 business days of a previous email, because I think that's enough time for them to figure out their lives and do other things. But the hack that I have here for myself is as soon as I send an email, I'll put a calendar reminder 2 weeks later saying follow up with I did Tomasz, Mateusz, Agnieszka, and then I'll do it that day. I had something else to say on this one. Oh, that was my hack. Never mind. And then finally, next slide, please. Be yourself. So have a personality. I think one of the challenges for folks who aren't in BD roles, and I know as startups you're going to wear many different hats, so you might be a product person, you might be an engineer, you might be a marketing person, and now you got to go do BD, or you might need to go do sales. I know it can feel like you need to be fake, and given that I give you a whole bunch of rules, you might feel like you need to be fake. And I think the thing here to remember 2 things. One is, no one likes salespeople, except for really good salespeople, because you don't think they're salespeople. They're really good at being fake, or they're really good at being real, and the way that they're real is anyway, something like that. And the second thing is, that made sense. The second thing is, if as you're remembering that I'm a person, don't forget that you're one. So be yourself. That's it. Oh, wait, last slide has the 10 commandments. I think it's actually 10 and 9. But this is the only one that matters. Everything else derives from it. So, any questions?
Do we have any questions for Amrit? Amrit, thank you very much for the talk.
Thank you.